Down in Australia, another Commonwealth country, the ABC, which is the Australian Broadcasting Company, has started to blame Joe Rogan. You know, Australia's a little bit behind. They're even more behind than we are here. I would wager behind in different ways than England is. They're really still on this disinformation and... got tuned Austrian. This disinformation and misinformation. And I'm going to blame Joe Rogan. They're blaming Joe Rogan and saying it's inconceivable that people would actually listen to him. This is the Australian Broadcasting Corporation's boss. I believe he's the chairman. Named Kim Williams, no questions asked. And let's see what he had to say.
I have a question about...
I have a question about Joe Rogan.
Joe Rogan, and you've sort of touched on elements of this in the US. He's obviously the world's most popular podcast host. He has 3 billion listeners. He's sort of managed to successfully capture that bro market in America. And his influence...
That's insulting right off the bat, is that bro market. The only people who listen to Joe Rogan must be bros. 3 billion bros.
Is such that in the wake of the US election, the Democrats have said that one of Kamala Harris's mistakes was that she didn't appear on his program. So I'm just wondering if you had any observations about what's behind the Joe Rogan effect, how you believe he's managed to so successfully capture this huge market. And then for us here in Australia, you know, how would or should the ABC be going about capturing that kind of audience?
Look, I'm not sure that I'm the right person to respond to that question. I am not a consumer or enthusiast about Mr. Rogan and his work.
Shocking.
I am not one of the 3 billion, and I'm unlikely to be 3 billion and one anytime soon.
All right, important note to make there, that he says he's not a consumer of Joe Rogan or an enthusiast. So at best, he's seen some clips. If he's not a consumer of it, he's seen a few clips that he didn't like. He doesn't really watch the show. I think that's fair to say.
I think people like Mr. Rogan prey on people's vulnerabilities. They prey on fear. They prey on anxiety. They prey on all of the elements that contribute to uncertainty in society, and they entrepreneur fantasy outcomes and conspiracy outcomes as being a normal part of social narrative. I personally find it deeply repulsive, and to think that someone has such remarkable power in the United States is something that I look at in disbelief. I'm also absolutely in dismay that this can be a source of public entertainment when it's really treating the public as plunder for purposes that are really quite malevolent.
What an amazing flurry of statements he made there. Joe Rogan's content is repulsive. It treats the population as if they're idiots. It's dangerous. It's conspiratorial. It acts as if dreams and fantastical outcomes are common practice and part of society. Absolutely none of this is obviously true about Joe Rogan. First of all, he's a comedian, so there is a degree of jest with his programming, but he also has, are you saying that the athletes, science experts, health experts, climate experts, comedians, politicians, what else is there on there? You know, businessmen, all these people he has on and speaks to, it's shocking to you that this is entertaining to people? I'm shocked that 3 billion people have watched and enjoyed this podcast. So what you're saying is you're better and able to identify this content better than the 3 billion people who actually watch it after he admitted that he doesn't really watch it. That's what he's saying. What we have here is there's some sort of, overrepresentation of weird-looking evil guys in media that happen to disagree with everything you like. When is there going to be, a guy who doesn't look like he's been deep in a lab constructing some way to take over the world. When are we going to have a guy who doesn't look like that come out and tell us about disinformation? It's always the same guys who look like they would have been in a 1960s James Bond film, telling you, stroking a cat, just being, your information is in fact disinformation, Mr. Bond. Except in this case, he's Australian, so it's a wallaby, I guess he's petting or something. Complete, they've cornered the market on this type of content, these guys who look like evil masterminds. But I want to show you more of what this guy in his skull said, because he spoke at a conference about misinformation. He's from, like I said, he's from the state broadcaster, and this is available on theblaze.com, written by yours truly. Kim Williams, he's a former media executive who's now the chair of the state-run ABC, and he spoke at the Australian National Press Club. Williams consistently made references to floods and tsunamis regarding an alleged increase in false information, stating that the government broadcaster needs to do a better job of providing lifeboats to citizens, especially young ones. So yeah, this is most of what he said in his speech, which you can find if you go through this link here. All he talks about is how misinformation is like a natural disaster, and people are drowning and struggling to stay afloat, so we need to provide them life rafts. It's all, like I said, exactly the way an evildoer would. You're drowning. You need me help. Wait, you're drowning? You need our help to get onto the lifeboats? You do. When he was... so this is just about what he said to this woman who asked him the question, calling Joe Rogan deeply repulsive. But then it goes on. Williams also claimed that the predominant sources of false information in the world are as follows: Vladimir Putin-funded bot farms, Andrew Tate's poisonous videos, and artificial intelligence. I'm not exaggerating at all. This is what he says in there. He blames Twitter bots that are funded by Russia. He says things like Andrew Tate's poisonous videos and AI are what are convincing people of false information. And of course, this would include Joe Rogan. Therefore, what do you think he wanted? Before we... Don't read ahead. And for your audio listeners, don't think ahead. What do you think he called for? Did you think he wanted for, people to pay more attention to what they're listening to or what their children are listening to and watching? Did he call for, people to look into multiple sources when they're doing and do their own research? Or did he call for, people to be a little bit more critical of what they hear and make sure they hear both sides and try to find out the facts behind what people are talking about? Which one of those do you think he did? Because the answer is none of them. I'm sure you figured that out. The answer actually was he wanted more money, of course. He said, as the poisoned waters of the tsunami rise, it's good to get the young especially into lifeboats. They are particularly vulnerable to the flood. Their minds are precious assets needed for future success. But lifeboats are always flimsy protections against surging tides, and one day our young will have to swim for themselves in poisoned seas. So they and everyone else will need to be better prepared, and that calls for an extra investment. Williams then called for an increase in government-backed fact-checking, children's programs, and curriculum. So how do we combat misinformation? Well, we brainwash the kids from the outset. We need more money for government fact checks. Things that everybody loves, right? Government fact checks, government children's programs, government-run curriculum. These are all things people think can never be corrupt. He concluded his speech by saying the ABC needs to attract younger audiences as a matter of intergenerational equity, and he also wants to train a new generation of young journalists. Again, if you want to verify what I've written here, you can go to this link and read his transcript to the National Press Club and see that he just talks about floods, tsunamis, and how the government broadcaster needs more money to convince people of what the real truth is, right?
Turn it up, Jordan.